What does it mean to have a raw card versus a graded card? What are PSA, BGS, and SGC? What do subgrades even mean? In this video, we'll look at the basics of card grading and the companies that offer grading services. When it comes to grading cards, it's important for collectors and investors alike. Today, we're going to look into it and get a deep dive on what it means to grade your cards. First off, what even is grading? I think it's important to make a distinction right away between raw and graded cards. So what is a raw card? When I say a raw card, that just means a card that isn't graded. I'm going to show you one right here. This is a raw card. It is by itself. It is not encapsulated in plastic. There is no numerical grade. It has never been sent to a grading company for grading. Now I'm going to show you a graded card. How can you tell this card is graded? You see the card here. It is inside the plastic. It is given a numerical grade on a 1 to 10 point scale. So when it comes to grading, the difference is you have a raw card, you send it in for grading, they give it a numerical score, they determine if it's authentic, they send it back to you encapsulated with a numerical grade on a 1 to 10 point scale. So now that we've given you the basic definition of grading, who are the grading companies? So there's 3 major grading companies. The first one I'm going to show you today is PSA. This one's going to have the all clear holder with the red label and the white around the top. The next company I'm going to talk to you about is BGS, also known as Beckett, a slightly different holder. The label you'll see at the top will change colors based on the grade as well. There's a gold, a black, a silver, and a paper label here that you might see for certain grades. And the final company that we're going to talk about is SGC. You'll see a very different style slab for the SGC slab. Some people in the hobby call this the tuxedo. It has the black around, and then you have a white label at the top. So PSA, BGS, or Beckett, and SGC are the 3 major grading companies. Now let's look at what's the process for each of these companies. And we'll start with what's the same about each of these companies. And to show you this, it's easiest to show you a Beckett slab to start, because Beckett does something called subgrades, where they actually give you a grade for each of the 4 categories that all 3 of these companies look at. Those categories are corners, edges, surface, and centering. And we should talk about each of those for a second. Corners, obviously the 4 corners, how sharp are they? If they're dull, that's going to remove points from your score. If they're really sharp and there's no chipping, then these will be a high grade. Edges, similarly, on edges, the thing to note is if you have a card that's got dark edges, it can show chipping a lot more easily. This Tom Brady card is a great example. It's got a black border, so if you see some white chipping around the edges, that can really take away from the card. Next, we'll talk about surface. The surface, you don't want any fingerprints on there. If there's any scratches, if there's any print defects, any print lines that you might see on the card, this is something that could all take away from the score of the surface for your card. And centering, maybe the least obvious of the 4, and something a lot of rookies get caught up on when it comes to card investing, is that if you look at the edges of the card here, you can see there is a border around the card. You want all those borders to be equal width. If one border is really far shifted one way or far shifted another way, that's going to really hurt your score overall. You can have a card that has 3 great subgrades. You can have great corners, great surface, great edges, but if the centering is really off, it could ruin the grade overall. So that's what all 3 of these companies look at, but let's talk about some of the nuances between these companies too. And this is where we've talked about some beginner things, but I think this is where it gets a little bit more intermediate. There are differences between these 3 companies. The first one that we should definitely look at is PSA and SGC do not give subgrades. Like I said, subgrades, corners, surface, edges, centering. You'll see there are grades for each of those 4 things on the Beckett or BGS slab. For PSA and for SGC, you will get a single number grade. Now there are some slight differences in the grading scale as well. So let's look at these one at a time and talk about the differences between them. PSA's lowest grade, that is numerical, is a 1. They also offer an A grade, which is just authentic, and is often for cards that have a serious amount of damage. Maybe there's paper peeled off the back of the card or things of that nature. They have half grades all the way up to 9 as well. So there's 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, and so on, all the way up to 9. There is, however, no PSA 9.5 grade. It jumps right from a PSA 9 to a PSA 10. In this sense, Beckett is very different. Beckett does not just have an authentic grade. They actually have an entirely different slab when they're just authenticating a card, but their grades, they have the 1, the 1.5, the 2, all the way up to a 9.5 and even a 10. Now there's also a difference between some of the 10s as well. PSA, for example, their highest grade is a 10. There's no distinction between a 10 and a quote-unquote perfect 10, where BGS does have a BGS 10 and a BGS 10 black label, meaning all 4 of the subgrades are also perfect 10s. SGC's scale is sort of a hybrid of these two. They do have an authentic grade like PSA does, but they also have a 9.5 grade just like BGS does. Similar to BGS, SGC also offers a gold label 10, which is very comparable to BGS's black label 10. If you have any questions about anything we covered, comment below. We'd love to know and answer those questions. And be sure to subscribe now and stay tuned for more awesome hobby content. Most of all, happy collecting.